As of the time of writing this, the Division franchise has been going strong for nearly 7.5 years now. It has been a long road full of many different updates and content drops across its two mainline titles, introducing us to modes like Survival, which redefined what a Division experience could be and paved the way for the gaming industry's next big genre. We've had Raids, which brought an epic level of scale and stakes to the realistic world of the Division. However, in my mind, there's one piece of content, one Division experience that stands out above the rest. Not because of its flashiness or innovation, but because of the sheer level of quality and how it proved to us that this franchise could be taken to the next level. All of this shines even brighter when we look at what's on the horizon for the Division 2 early next year. So today, let's have a look at the past and present of Warlords of New York and talk about what it means for the future. Let's get into this.
Alright, so recently, as happens to me more than I would like to admit, I was down a rabbit hole of old Division videos. This time they were all around the Warlords of New York era of the game. For anyone who doesn't know, Warlords was released 1 year after the main Division 2 launch in March of 2020 as the one and only paid post-launch content that the Division 2 has received for now. And it was a smash hit, despite Ubisoft's expectations for it being rather low. In fact, I want to say at one point I heard they expected it to fail. However, and this does need fact checking, I want to say that WONI ended up being the highest, if not one of the highest, player population points in the history of the Division IP. Meaning there were more people on the game checking it out and playing than ever. Maybe it didn't beat Division 1's record-breaking launch, but the point is, it was insanely popular. And going through these videos, it's reminded me just how far the pendulum has swung in regards to online coverage of the game. I mean, back when WONI launched, you had every major outlet making reviews, guides, all of that. Content creators of all kinds were checking it out, independent reviewers. I mean, it just seems like such a foreign concept to us 3.5 years later, given everything that has happened since. Now, I've always been a big fan of WONI. When asked the question before, I've explained that WONI is my favorite Division campaign of the major three, the other two, of course, being the Division 1 and 2's main campaigns. I've always enjoyed the immersive missions it has, the open world, but this video binge I was on, I came across a video by Massive G, who I haven't watched a ton of his stuff really besides Division videos, which I always think are excellent, so I'll link it down below, but it was just something about his presentation of Warlords content, his explanations and articulation on what he liked about it, that really made me both solidify views that I had already had and discover new ones to fully cement my feelings that, yeah, Warlords was the best damn content the Division 2 ever released. In my opinion, of course. And so because we have a comparable content drop with the Brooklyn DLC coming next year, I wanted to kind of go over some of what I feel made Warlords so excellent and talk about the future with the next corner of the Division world we're going to be exploring over in Brooklyn. Two main topics I want to cover, open world and the campaign/main missions. Let's start with the open world. Now, I have always thought that Warlords open world was stunning and had some of the absolute neatest landmarks of any Division open world we've had. Obviously, one of the favorites among anyone I've talked to is the burning building and its wreckage site below, incredibly detailed and just epic how you can see it from so far away with the smoke trailing off into the sky, but there's some that I don't even think are meant to be all that iconic, yet I find them to be so cool. For example, in the Theo part of the Manhunt when you're up on this roof, the skyscrapers with moss and vines and other greenery taking over them, especially at night when you've got those red beacons on each corner, so damn cool. Or when you're on Kajika's portion and it takes you to this construction site, my god, the verticality and gameplay implications built into the art design here is so masterful. But despite my appreciation for Warlords' open world, I don't think I ever came to the conclusion that Massive G does here in this video, where he says that Warlords is the Division franchise's best open world. Now, at first when you hear that, and I did the same, I was like, no, it's Division 1's world, clearly. But then I thought about it because it's not actually the Division 1's physical world that I love so much. I mean, it's excellent, of course, but it's the way that the atmosphere meshes with the physical world to create the insane immersion that the Division 1 had. And so when you take that out of the equation and you look at the level design and layout of the Division 1's world itself, it might actually be the weakest of the three compared to DC and Lower Manhattan. Now again, that's still a very high bar as all three are phenomenal, but compare the streets of the Division 1 to the streets of Warlords, not factoring in the season, the weather, the atmosphere, the amount of added detail and layers and just the insane level design that Warlords has. I mean, please log on and just go walk around in it for yourself. It's on another level, like I said, compared to anything else we've seen in the Division franchise before. And combine that with the fantastic atmosphere that it does create in those smoky areas when there's a rainstorm, it's just really, like I said, plain excellent. And it makes me think, could you imagine mixing the Division 1's perfection of atmosphere and immersion with Warlords' level of detail and level design? I mean, that is Division 3 Game of the Year material right there. But that's the open world. Let's talk about the main missions. The thing I've always enjoyed about WONI's missions are their scale and set design, whether we're talking about approaching the beached tanker ship, fighting the turreted APC, tiptoeing through the shock minefield, fighting the drone swarm, dodging the fire hose, boarding the underground cleaner drill machine, right? It just goes on and on for how epic these missions were. Now, I think one valid criticism is that all of these missions kind of fit into the same category. The long, real operation type missions, they've got grit and challenge to them, unlike something such as Lincoln Memorial from DC, which is a much faster pace. So in that sense, I think WONI's missions are all a bit less replayable, but for my own personal preference, I much prefer campaign missions to be as memorable as WONI's were, as I usually seek to satisfy my replayability itch elsewhere in these games. Now with these, it makes me think to compare them to the seasonal manhunt missions that we get now. And imagine missions with the story depth and intrigue of the current missions we get these days combined with the new environments, set pieces, and epic gameplay encounters of the WONI missions. Again, my goodness, just salivating over the concept of that into Division 3. But maybe we don't have to wait until then. So as should be clear by now, WONI is fantastic. At least I think so. If you disagree, let me know your thoughts. But I find it to be really exceptional. And although for a time we thought we would never see it, we are indeed getting another comparable content drop for the Division 2 with this Brooklyn DLC coming in Year 5 Season 4. Now, it is important to note that Massive has specified that this upcoming content is a DLC, compared to Warlords being an expansion, and in their words, that's because it won't be, quote, quite as large. I suspect that's because it's not going to feature all of the same new progression systems, items, and other complementary things that made Warlords that full expansion. But what we do know, courtesy to the confirmation back on Division Day, is that regardless of the size, the Brooklyn DLC will contain more than one open world zones and main missions, which are obviously the two main content pieces we've been discussing this entire video. So do I think we can expect the upcoming Brooklyn DLC to match, or dare I even say possibly exceed, the level of quality we saw Warlords produce in these two departments? Well, I think it could go one of two ways. Let's talk about the more pessimistic viewpoint first, that being the game's development team has been all but completely replaced since Warlords released. I won't go into the full story as I think the majority of you know it by now, but almost immediately after Warlords released and for that following year, the Division 2's team at Massive got disbanded, with the vast majority of notable devs being moved over to Star Wars Outlaws, also in development at Massive. The team size got all the way down to just 6 people, I want to say it was, before Ubisoft changed their mind on canceling Division 2 development and allow the remaining team to find new partners, which would later become Ubisoft Bucharest. Now, it took a long time and is arguably still happening to where Bucharest and any new developers that come onto the project, we know Ubisoft Shanghai is now involved, to learn Snowdrop, the Division's engine, if they had not used it before. And so I think all of this means two things when it comes to what to expect in this DLC. Firstly, the team that reached such great heights in the Warlords expansion, they had been working on the Division since the first game, right? Learning, iterating, refining, and ultimately growing their craft with developing in the Snowdrop engine to create the masterpiece that, again, I think Warlords is. Those people, or at least the vast majority of them, will not be involved in the creation of this new DLC. And so between the lack of that history on the Division and the lessened proficiency with Snowdrop, it is possible that this DLC might not quite have the same punch that Warlords did when it comes to the open world and main mission design. Doesn't make me any less excited for it, I just want to set expectations that that could be a possibility. On the flip side, however, looking at this more optimistically, it's also very possible that this DLC matches or exceeds Warlords, as I stated earlier. Technology has done nothing but advance in the past 4 years since WONI's development. We know that Ubisoft has invested into technology like Scalar, which is basically a development tool that helps create highly detailed and vast open worlds using less intensive resources. And probably the biggest advantage is that this new team is still working on the same game, right? They have full access to WONI's files, assets, basically everything they could hope to have to be able to analyze what went into making that experience so great. In addition to that, look at what they've accomplished so far. The countdown mode was described as their trial run content. It looks gorgeous and has some awesome set pieces like the burning nuclear towers in the background. It also achieved some fantastic gameplay feats. I contest that that extraction portion of the mode is the most hectic and fun gameplay experience the franchise has to offer. In Descent, obviously people have some problems with that mode, but I think it's hard to deny how visually compelling it is. There's a lot of very sharp detail in there. And as I mentioned earlier, the seasonal missions that we've gotten, despite the limitations of them having having to use old areas and zones to house these new missions, they found really clever and innovative ways to enhance them, whether it was Season 9's epic ending with the Marauder drone and the Black Tusk ambush, Season 11's whole backwards flip with the fully automated enemy waves and the completely new boss archetype of Sparkles, or as we just got with Year 5 Season 1, the puzzles that they were able to fit into this old space that we already know so well. They've done so much to be creative within these constraints, so imagine what they'll be able to do once the new play spaces are fully their own design as well. At the end of the day, it could go either way. However it plays out, we're going to be getting these fully new missions and all new corners of the Division world to explore, and that makes me happy enough. Even if Warlords stands alone as that perfect package of content that can't be replicated, I'll just be glad that I got to experience that at one point in time. And if you haven't visited that part of the Division 2 lately, I mentioned it earlier, but I highly recommend just turning your world difficulty down and just walking around the open world there. It's really stunning. There is insane levels of detail that you'll find and a lot of secrets to explore. That's all I've got for today, folks. Let me know your thoughts on this discussion. How do you view Warlords when you think back to all of the content the Division 2 has received, and how do you think it'll influence this DLC that we've got coming up, if at all? If you enjoyed this video and want more Division content like this in the future, click that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. And for notifications on videos, streams, official news posts, and server status updates by the developers, check out our Discord link below. You'll find my other social links there too. That said, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Ow.